Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran using a tape echo machine that literally uses magnetic tape from 3M, or else a scrappy upstart, using a tape echo plugin where you just type in numerical values for timing and decay. This is your show, because ultimately it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the second Friday of January 2022, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Todd with one D, who drove one of those Land Rovers that says Discovery on the back, and who's always trying to sell you cheat codes to Call of Duty for hundreds of dollars. And old Todd, with one D, would charge you thousands of dollars for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music and merch commission-free. This year, Bandzoogle would like to congratulate its members on surpassing $100 million in commission-free sales through their websites. The Working Songwriter podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you would like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, you can check out my tour page, joepugmusic.com/tour, where there are a bevy of new tour dates posted all around the world, from London to Wolf Trap. Or you can find me the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for Sunday Songs. That's a live stream. I'm live, I'm playing tunes live, I'm taking questions in the live chat, I'm taking requests in the live chat. It's a really fun, really interactive experience. I dare to say that we're building something of a little community over there, including many people who are listeners to this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. That's the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern. Head on over to joepugmusic.com and click on the live stream tab to set a reminder. Finally, if you enjoyed this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon. You search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription. A subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to everybody who's taken the time and the capital to support the show in that way. If you're not in a place where you can contribute in that way, I totally get it. You can still help us out in a couple ways that are entirely free. First, you could leave us a rating in the iTunes store, or second, you could simply tell a friend about the show, spread the word about the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. I hope that you enjoy this chat that I had with Goodbye Road a few weeks ago. Our Our guests this week are an Americana and folk music supergroup of a kind. 1/3 of the trio is Drew Holcomb, an alumnus of our podcast already and known to many of our listeners. The other 2/3 is rounded out by Amanda Sudano and Abner Ramirez, the husband and wife duo also known as Johnnyswim. Johnnyswim has appeared on Prairie Home Companion, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson. They have also been the subject of the Magnolia Network TV show Home on the Road with Johnnyswim. Drew Holcomb has been a working songwriter for the last 2 decades with a slew of albums released on Dual Tone Records that have reached the Billboard charts. He's toured with Susan Tedeschi, Ryan Adams, Los Lobos, the Avett Brothers, and many others. Holcomb and Johnnyswim formed Goodbye Road in 2018 and released an EP that would have them make a promotional stop on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Rolling Stone dubbed their song from that album, Ring the Bells, a collective call for action. They have just released Volume 2 of their collaboration, and I got a chance to jump on the phone with them a few weeks ago to hear about their musical journey so far. Drew Holcomb of Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors, and Amanda and Abner of Johnnyswim. When your powers combine, you become Goodbye Road. Thanks to Goodbye Road for being on the Working Songwriter podcast. Drew, you've been on the podcast before, so I think our listeners are well-versed in your backstory, and if they're not, I encourage them to go back and listen to your original episode. I'd like to take a moment, though, to talk to Amanda and Abner about their musical journey kind of earlier on, before Goodbye Road got booted up. Abner, you're from Florida originally?
Jacksonville, Florida, the southernmost city in Georgia.
Right on. What did music look like in your household growing up?
My dad was a tone-deaf pastor, and my mother was a wonderful musician and singer. But my dad loved singing louder than anybody. Whenever we were at church, I've got many memories of begging my father to stop singing. But no, we grew up listening to old Cuban music. My dad loved country music, and I told him I'd never play country music as long as I lived. And here I am, not really playing country music, but about as country music adjacent as it gets.
Yeah, definitely in the same neighborhood. Are those, all jokes aside about your dad not being able to hold a tune, like, are those positive memories for you, that music in the church?
They're not just positive, they're powerful. They, there's a passion my father had for music, and its ability to change a room or to change somebody's attitude or change an atmosphere. And I could see it happen. Even if my dad could do it, I feel like anybody could do it.
Man, that's such a... I've been doing this podcast for a while, and I haven't heard anyone describe music in that way before, but I can't think of a more succinct definition of music and what music actually does. And that is, when it's good and when it's connecting, it does immediately change the room. You're transported to a different, almost like a different physical place at that point.
100%.
Amanda, what did music look like in your household growing up?
And so they're all the time. We kind of have a joke in our family that everybody has a song. Like any family event, everybody's like, I've got a song. You want to hear my new song? Everybody, every cousin, every aunt, uncle. And so it's always just been like such a crucial part of our kind of family structure, really. Like even if we were, somewhere traveling and there was a show, guess what? We're going to see Michael Jackson. Doesn't matter that you're 6. It's the bad tour. It's raining in London. We're going to Wembley Stadium, So it's just always part of our fun and just part of just the fibers of our family.
That's very unique. Many people grow up with music in their lives, learning an instrument or learning to sing. Very few people, though, encounter music in that way, which is kind of composition focused from a very early age. It's very unusual.
Yeah. I always joke that, like I wish I could play instruments better, but my parents were like, yeah. We're touring, we're traveling. You can take piano lessons for 3 weeks, and then you're going to be out of it for 9 weeks, and then you can take 2 more, and then you're done again. So I think just because of the touring structure, it was just like, but my parents are storytellers. Like, the songs that they wrote were storytelling songs, and so that was really always like their main focus.
Yeah, I feel you on the instrument thing, but don't you feel like sometimes I don't know. I feel like sometimes being too good at your instrument can get in the way of writing songs and kind of can get in the way of narrative sometimes.
I hope so.
So
I'll tell myself that.
I used to always think that you couldn't write a great song if you're an amazing guitar player. Like it would get too complicated. But then we wrote a song with Vince Gill, and I changed my mind.
yeah, well, fair enough. Yeah, he's proving my logic wrong in real time and has been for the last 40 years. That's for sure. So you two then. You two would join forces. You met in Nashville. How did you guys end up there? And can you kind of describe your meeting with one another?
You know, funny enough, that it was because not necessarily exactly because of songwriting, but Nashville has such a strong songwriting community from all phases of the Nashville experience, whether it's professional songwriters or professional food runners at P.F. Chang's. Man and I would find ourselves in rooms early in our dating life, early in our kind of friendship before we were dating, where people would just be passing a guitar around the room and everybody was singing a song. And it was actually my roommate at the time introduced us, who was a songwriter named Matt Carney and an artist. He and I lived in a little house in Franklin, and we were in downtown Nashville going to Cafe Coco. And the most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life was there, and he happened to know her. And so I asked for an introduction, and that's how we met.
Right on. And was it a musical partnership immediately, or was it a personal partnership first?
Yeah.
I would love to answer if I can. Amanda asked me. She could ask me anything. She could ask me to literally watch paint dry, and it would have been a paint dry watching partnership immediately. But she heard me play a show at 12th and Porter, a little club in Nashville, and she asked if we could write together. And I didn't even hear anything other than that I was going to say yes as quickly as possible.
Fair enough. Now it's, a decade and a half on, and your songs have connected with audiences around the world. So sometimes when something's successful like that, it can feel like a foregone conclusion. But of course, when you're first starting out, there's no guarantee that stuff is going to connect. Can you remember the first time that you guys composed something or maybe brought it to an audience where you felt like, wow, this is maybe more than the sum of its parts, and this might actually work?
I think the time that stands out for me, I'm curious what your answer would be, but we've been playing like coffee shops and colleges, and it felt like, okay, people are liking it, people are playing our little EP, but it still just felt like we were hustling, like we were just playing whatever, we're saying yes to whatever shows we can say yes to. I guess there's two. So we played a song for an agency. When we first signed with our agent, he was like, come to my offices in New York and you got to play for everybody. And the team of people in that room are still the team of people that are working with us, not just on the agent front, but now some of them work over at Spotify, and some of them, like they've all kind of like dispersed and gone different places, but we still work with all of them. And so it's like I think that was a turning point in our career, where it was like we played one song and they were like, we're on your team forever. And that was huge. But the first thing that really came to my mind was shortly thereafter we recorded our first full-length album, and we were playing in Atlanta, Smithsonian Bar, I think. And we walked out, and the room was completely packed. The album had come out the day before, and everybody was singing every word to our album that we just put out the day before, and it was a completely sold-out show. And we were like, what just happened? Like, it was so confusing and like jostling, but like obviously very exciting. But they were singing, they're crying to songs that like, I'm like, we just put this out yesterday and you've already connected to it like so fully. And that completely rocked our worlds. That was mine.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have a different one.
No, that's it.
How do you process that on a personal level? Because when you have a concert like that, so it's packed out, people know all the words, even though the record came out the day before, that is, at that point, that's a pretty big left turn in your life, because that means, just by definition, you have the test case right there. This is going to work. So now our lives look different. How were you personally and as a couple able to navigate that left turn? Because it's a pretty big left turn.
Well, the next night, nobody knew any of the words, so they really brought us down to earth,
Fair enough.
Yeah, I don't know. There was a lot of navigation. It's a lot of holding on with two hands and just keep going. It was more confirmation for us than anything. that you got a shot here. There's something that really could you can make a life out of. And so it was just, it wasn't a one step that led us to that point. It was years of failure, of tears in the car when nobody would come to a show, and it showed us just to keep on the path we were on, and I think we still are, literally.
When did that path cross paths with Mr. Drew Holcomb of Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors?
Drew, you can help with this, because I don't actually remember the first time we all like hung out in a room. And I think actually I've known Ellie, Drew's wife Ellie, since middle school.
Oh wow.
So I've known of Drew since him and Ellie started being together. And we would see each other at festivals. You're on the same kind of circuit for a while. They were like always way ahead of us. But we would see each other, they're playing at that stage, we're playing at this stage, and maybe we could run over. But I want to say the first time that we kind of like sat down and said, hey, we should do something together, I was actually getting a facial, and Abner and Drew had breakfast.
We had what?
I was getting a facial, and you guys had breakfast.
That's right.
Yeah, we had met.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we had met at some different festivals, cross paths,
right.
and had a lot of mutual friends, artist friends, and just like personal friends in Nashville. And was that breakfast before or after y'all played Moon River? I think it was after, wasn't it?
Man,
it was after the first Moon River.
Oh yeah, after the one that was in Memphis.
That was still in Memphis.
Yeah.
It was
so we had them at this festival I started. It was in Memphis at the time, called Moon River. They came and played the festival, and we kind of hit it off, but didn't really have a lot of time to connect. And then, we had lunch, and they were. I remember y'all were shooting a like secret music video at the Exit Inn.
Oh, that's right.
And
that night.
And Abner posted this thing that was like, "Hey, I'm eating breakfast at Nashville with my friend Drew. The first like 5 people who find me at the restaurant get free tickets to this music video taping show that we're doing that night." And everybody that came to the table like knew both of our music, and so Abner and I were kind of like, "Huh, that's interesting." Maybe we should. So it was like, maybe we should do a tour together. And then we started talking about that, and then we were like, well, if we're going to tour together, we should write something together. And so, we just like had a real sense of friendship, kinship pretty quickly. And everybody had told me like, Abner's amazing. He's got a lot more energy than you though. So you got to kind of buckle up. And, which is totally, totally true. But I feel like I've risen to the challenge of having the same
100
energy that Abner has. So then I a few months after that lunch, I just flew out to LA and stayed with them for a couple of days. And that's where we wrote the first songs from the first EP.
What do you think it was that had your two audiences? What do you think made them mesh? Because as you guys know from being in entertainment for a long time, a lot of things that seem like they should work on paper, like, oh, we'll go do a tour with that group, it'll work perfect. Everything that works on paper doesn't always seem to pan out when you actually hit stage. So what do you think it is about the art that you were creating on your own and separately beforehand? What do you think the common thread is there that was drawing similar audiences to your shows?
I think it's probably the same thing that drew us together as friends. Like, there's obviously a common thread. There's a simpatico. There's a connection that we have that immediately made us want to be friends forever. And I think whatever that is probably seeps out into our music, the way that we talk about things, maybe our perspective on things, the mixture of all those little parts that make us obsessed with one another as far as our friendship is concerned is probably the same thing that comes out in our music. I wish that we could say that we've written with all these great songwriters and come up with all these amazing songs. And the truth is that we've written with a lot of great songwriters and we didn't like the songs that we wrote. And I think part of it was because it felt like they didn't get us and we didn't really get them. But then when you meet somebody and you're like, oh, we get each other, let's write songs together because we get each other, then all of a sudden you get some magic happening. And I think, probably that's what people have seen, in our music separately and together.
I think there's also been I think the time when we started writing songs together was important to the sort of
True.
the authenticity of the song. So when I went out there, it was like 4 days after the Charlottesville chaos, and Ring the Bells came out of that. I think all three of us sort of come out of a church background, as Abner was discussing earlier, and we were very brokenhearted and angry about some people inside of sort of a church-based background that were sort of excusing this behavior. And obviously Abner and Amanda have a unique perspective on it as people of color, and I'm just a sort of a Southern white guy who was experiencing a lot of sadness at like sort of, oh, I thought these things were behind us, and so we wrote that song out of that like just heartbroken anger, which is a really interesting place to write a song out of. And that sort of set the table for just like, oh, we're like opening ourselves up, not just to each other, but to our audiences. And that sort of, I think that just connected with a lot of people. And then when we recorded those songs, it was like a week after a mass shooting, and it was 2 days after Tom Petty died. And so we recorded, that version of Won't Back Down just in the wake of that. It wasn't like some like, hey, let's find a cool cover. It was like, I'm like brokenhearted because my like favorite artist in the world just died. How can we pay tribute? So there was like, in the writing and the recording and the hanging out, there's a lot of like honesty about what's going on in our lives. And yeah, we just got pretty close pretty quick,
It's funny. It seems like, describing the way that you guys just clicked with one another, it seems to me from the outside looking in, what that allowed you to do, it kind of gave you this key to immediately access an amount of intimacy with one another that sometimes can take a very long time to develop. Because what you're talking about writing from that place of heartbreak and anger. To actually do that on a genuine level, that's a pretty intimate place to be writing from. So it's almost like you were granted like the secret power to enter into to intimacy with one another very soon. Are you stuck in a rut? Are you tired of listening to that Jimmy Buffett 20th Century Masters CD over and over again and need some new music? Are you sick of making hamburger helper beef stroganoff for dinner every night and you want something new to cook? What you are looking for, my friends, is the Enthusiast Digest. That's my monthly newsletter, which arrives in your inbox the first Sunday morning of every month, bursting with musical recommendations, poetry selections, recipes and cooking techniques for my favorite dishes, and items of general interest culled from the vast cesspool that is the internet. The Enthusiast Digest is free to subscribe to. If you dig the poetry that you hear on this show and the artists that you're hearing from, you'll dig the newsletter because I approach it with the exact same sensibility of curation. Go to joepugmusic.com/newsletter today to sign up for free. That is joepugmusic.com/newsletter. It takes approximately 15 seconds to sign up for a free newsletter that will enrich the first Sunday of your month with a veritable cornucopia of new and delightful recommendations. That's the Enthusiast Digest, the first Sunday of every month. Sign up for free at joepugmusic.com/newsletter. Goodbye Road's first release featured a song entitled Ring the Bells, which was a raw, emotional, heart-on-the-sleeve primal scream. I don't think a songwriter necessarily has to be shot through with powerful emotion to write a powerfully emotive song, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And there's a poem by the recently departed Charles Simic that explores this visceral connection. It's entitled Butcher Shop. Sometimes, walking late at night,
I stop before a closed butcher shop. There is a single light in the store, like the light in which the convict digs his tunnel. An apron hangs on the hook, the blood on it smeared into a map of the great continents of blood, the great rivers and oceans of blood. There are dark knives that glitter like altars in a dark church, where they bring the cripple and the imbecile to be healed. There is a wooden block where bones are broken, scraped clean. A river dried to its bed, where I'm fed, where deep in the night I hear a voice.
So what do you guys, just on a nuts and bolts level, when you start working together, particularly for that first EP in, I think, 2018, on a nuts and bolts level, this is a podcast about writing songs. Drew, what are you good at and what do you bring to the table in a write like that? And what are you looking for from Amanda and Abner in a write like that you're not good at?
Well, I would say that our experiences together is that it's sort of a baseball metaphor. Is like Abner's like a pitcher, and he's just throwing pitches. Like, what about this? 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 And I'm just trying to catch as many of them as I can, and then sort of focus the energy in that direction. And then I think we also all brought some fun, or not some fun, but some interesting, we had this line. I just had this line in my journal that I didn't know what to do with. I have a writing journal that I keep of just lyrics and song ideas. And it just said this line, if all is fair in love and war, then what the hell is love for? And it was I never had anything for that. So writing this song, I was like, hey, what about this as a pre-chorus? And meanwhile, Abner's just he's just in the stairwell singing out all this anger and beauty all at the same time. And Amanda and I are just catching it. And then Amanda's like, all right, let's we got all this stuff now. Let's focus it in and make a song out of it. And it was just, I think we both there's just a lot of space given, none of our co-writes have ever had a real significant agenda. It was let's just find something that connects with all of us. And then also too, we all have very sort of different, I had to learn to sing high. I found parts of my voice that I didn't know about when we made these songs, because their ranges are a lot higher than mine. But I was like, I'm going to get up there with y'all. I'm going to figure this out, So there's a lot of fun challenging of each other, in a sort of, camaraderie way, but it was definitely still a challenge. And then the second EP was especially challenging because we started it about a week before the world shut down, and they're in LA, I'm in Nashville. And so we had planned to go in the studio in April of 2020. And obviously that wasn't going to happen. And so we were writing these songs remotely, and project got pushed back. And then when we saw each other, we didn't want to write. We just wanted to hang out because we hadn't seen each other in a year. And we kind of let this second one be a little more organic and didn't put any real timeline on it. But it still had the same sort of experience. The difference is Abner worked a lot on this project on the production side, as he was building out a studio in LA. And then we sort of brought in our friends from the first EP, Jonathan Berlin and Jeremy Griffith, to sort of put all these puzzle pieces together in a sonic landscape. And it was a very the whole thing has been very collaborative, even getting two management teams and two agents to try to work together.
Yeah,
it's pretty,
they work together really well.
They do work together really well.
Amanda and Abner, what on the creative and songwriting side do you guys feel like you bring to a write with Drew that what is your wheelhouse, and then what is something that you think Drew brings that you guys aren't always the strongest at, that you kind of learn from him on?
One thing I love about brilliant songwriters, and I consider Drew and Amanda both brilliant songwriters, and I mean that, is that they can find, it's almost like they found a supernatural loom in which they can reach into the ether of the universe, and they can pull from nothingness, from an abyss. They can pull these mystical webs of lyrics and ideas and songs, and they put them together meticulously and beautifully. And getting to see Amanda do that all the time and being able to do that with Drew and observe Drew do that, I hope that makes sense. Just weaving together something from nothing. It's like, wow, I felt like I just watched magic. And for me, it's a wild card to have in the room, I think, in those moments, because I am a Tasmanian devil of songwriting, I think, where me by myself, many songs aren't finished, but there's a million ideas that never are woven together into anything coherent. And so it was, especially in the first project and also in the second one, Drew and Amanda became a safe place for me to be full Tasmanian devil. And they were able to be their brilliant selves, and it worked together. They created almost a cocoon for me to be able to be a madman and piece these songs together. It was, I don't know if that makes sense.
I think Abner, like, when he's passionate about something, especially in a songwriting session, so Ring the Bell specifically, you know, everybody's frustrated. We're like talking about Charlottesville for the whole day. We're all feeling things. Abner goes, like Drew said, into the stairwell, and is just singing, and just words are coming out, sounds are coming out, like, and so, you know, in those situations, it's like you're just watching the storm happen, and you're like, all these like brilliant things are flying around the room, and you're grabbing hold of things. And there were some times where he, you know, I mean, I don't remember specifically, but I'm sure it happened where he would just be like, and we're like, what the hell is love even for? Does that work there? You know? And you're like almost translating. It's like he's speaking in tongues, and you're like, let me translate what that is. But I feel like, I mean, you are a loomer of words too. Does that make sense?
Sure.
You're good with words. I on the other hand. But yeah, I think, you know, you have to give yourself the credit of being great at looming words too. Just on that one song, you were turned into Tasmanian devil, I think.
It's funny, so many songwriters, when they're writing a song themselves, a problem that they run into is it's two very different processes, like the generating of material and then kind of like the editing and the polishing of material. It takes two different brains. It sounds like as a group, you guys were able to form an entity that did both sides of that at the same time.
Yeah, and you know one thing I really appreciate about when the three of us write songs together, Amanda and I have a term, when the song sounds when a lyric specifically sounds overworked, overproduced, overdone, like sounds like fake poetry, if that makes sense. Even when we're writing just Amanda and I, we'll be like, that's a little three writers in a room.
I think we got that from Natalie Hemby.
Oh, is that from Natalie Hemby?
I think that's a Natalie Hembyism.
Yeah, we use it all the time. That's a little three writers in a room. But when it's us three writers in a room, I feel like we do it. There's a necessary process of turning the editor off and finding the joy, even in sad songs. Like you find that you're being led by something in your chest, and not necessarily in your brain just yet.
Comforted.
That feels comforted in this direction, and you're following this thing, and you know there's a song at the end of it. You hope there's a whole song at the end of it, but you know there's an idea there. And I think ultimately when three writers get in a room, there's a lot of editing at the forefront of the songwriting session, and hence the Natalie Hembyism of three writers in a room. But I think our collective superpower as Goodbye Road is the ability to turn the editor off and follow the journey wherever it takes us.
Why? Why is it the combination of you three? What do you think it is that leads to that ability to trust intuition rather than, you know, kind of cold, logical thinking?
Yep. I think number one, relationship. I think it takes a lot of trust to not have to make sense of every bit of songwriting you're doing. So we have a relationship that we can build our songwriting on. I don't know. I think it's almost mythical levels. So be able to walk in a room with three people and have that kind of trust immediately without knowing them. So I think relationship's a big deal. I think whiskey's a big deal. And I think experience, you know, we've been doing it for a while, and we found a simpatico that we can, we knew we resonated with each other quickly.
Yeah, I think there was like a certain level of shared story. You know, we've both Johnnyswim and me and my band have had, you know, some pretty decent success, but not like, neither one of us have had like some huge, you know, hit song that took us to the amphitheaters and the arenas of the world. And but we have like fans. That's one thing that's really interesting. Our fan base, while there's a lot of overlap, there also is just a lot of sort of cultural overlap, meaning that people who love the whole record, people that love songs from lots of records. Like we don't have, we have both a very loyal sort of long-term fan bases, people that have come to see us play a dozen times and et cetera. And I think that there's a kinship in sort of being like, not to like name check the podcast, but we are working songwriters. We're like out there doing it and have been doing it for a long time. And so there's also a sense that we know that it's not like this one song is your one chance. It's like, put out a great song, make a great recording of it and let the chips fall. And if it connects, great. If it doesn't, do it again. And, I think there's a kinship in that. And then also too, just practically, I came into this relationship at a pretty low point in my sort of songwriting career. I had just sort of hit a spot where I just was like, I'd not done much collaborating up to that point. And I kind of felt like I had some health issues that were going on that were driving some of this. I had gotten meningitis, was in the hospital for 8 days, and it took me like 8 months to come out of it. But that's about the time we started writing these songs. And I just was like a little more open-handed than I'd ever been, because I had just kind of hit some walls where I was like, man, I don't even know if I have anything left to say by myself. And then this EP happened, and it really sort of breathed a whole new life into my creativity, which was, so I'm like sort of forever grateful to them for. I feel like I kind of came in a little like busted up and wobbly, and Abner and Amanda were like, no, you're great. Your work has always been great, and you've got more great to come. Let's go find it. So.
How does, because obviously it's an ongoing project, how does the experience of working creatively in this group with this triumvirate here, and this is a question for both of you, how does working in this group affect the creative process of, for lack of a better word, your main projects?
I'll go first because I have a very like specific answer. Up until this project, I didn't have it like all of my I never went to like the big arena, like fill the arena sized song. I was afraid of those. I was like, that's not what I do. I write like, mid-tempo rock and roll, ballads. And so then we did this Ring the Bell song, and it was just like, it's just a big like anthemic song. And so when I went back in to write the next record for me and my band, I was like, I had experience what that's like, especially in the room. And Abner and Amanda already had a lot of those type songs in their repertoire, songs like Diamonds and Home. And so I wrote, like Family, which has been probably the biggest song of my career so far. I wrote sort of in the wake of that thinking and inspired by that sort of way. And so there was an expansion of what I even thought I could do vocally and songwriting wise, and now I've written a lot of big songs, like when I say big, I mean like expansive, Family, End of the World. And then I've got a bunch on a new record coming out this year. So those songs I don't think would have happened without this collaboration.
Yeah, man. For me, I feel like, first of all, that's awesome. The general sense I have since the change in me since doing this project with Drew is that the songs are there always, at all times, waiting to be found. And I've never really felt that before. I've always felt like, I'll write in seasons. When I'm feeling it, I'll find that muse and follow it to the end of the song, But after doing Goodbye Road, it's like, no, it's always there. And it might feel different if you show up Monday to Friday. Every day can feel completely different. You might not always feel super inspired. But the songs are there, and it's been a really encouraging thing for me to feel. Because it's like writing a song for me is like finding a family member, favorite cousin that I haven't seen since last Thanksgiving or something.
And you have to find out if you still like them at the end.
And you got to figure out if you still like them. Maybe our politics are too different to be friends anymore. But it's been really encouraging to just I write more since we did Goodbye Road, since we've done Goodbye Road. And I enjoy writing more since we began Goodbye Road.
This is another question for both of you, and I don't mean to end the podcast on what could be kind of like a pedestrian note, but it's very interesting to me, and since this is kind of an industry-specific podcast, I think it'll make sense. What has it been like on the business end to be able to release a new project to your fan bases? Sometimes it seems like there's always so much music coming out into the world that it can be hard to get people excited about, like, I'll just speak for myself. It's like, all right, well, it's Joe Pug's 6th record coming out here. What's so exciting about that, right? It's Johnnyswim's, 3rd, 4th, 5th records, Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors. Did you find, just on a business end and from being able to excite a fan base, that kind of coming to them with this new look, for lack of a better term, like this new, almost like product, that this invigorated them in a way, both for this project and for your main things?
Oh, for sure. It's we're always kind of like blown away. This year, I think specifically, we had it very cut and dry because we had just released an album in spring, and then we had Goodbye Road songs come out, so we could kind of see really clearly within a couple months just the playlisting for Goodbye Road, the excitement for Goodbye Road. You have 2 fan bases, and there, of course, there's a lot of overlap, but there's also a lot of not overlap, and so you're finding these new listeners, when you do put out these, a collaboration, and people get really, really stoked about, like, oh, I haven't heard this other artist, and now I'm finding them, and now I want to share that with my friends because I found somebody new, or that I think is new. So there's always, every time we do it, I feel like we get really excited because we, are meeting new people, and new people are coming to shows. We love when we're at a show and somebody's there with a Drew Holcomb t-shirt on,
Last night we played Iron City in Birmingham. I saw 2 or 3 Drew Holcomb, the Neighbors t-shirts in the crowd.
And it's just as exciting as when we see Goodbye Road, because we're like, you're a Goodbye Roader. We already know, So
yeah, I think I don't think it's the case with every collaboration, but I think we're one of the lucky ones where 1 + 1 = 3, and that's certainly been our experience.
You're so good with words.
No.
Should be songwriter.
Yeah, I think I just agree that there's, like, I think the coolest thing about that is there's this curiosity factor there that, like you said, oh, I'm Drew and the Neighbors are putting out another song. It's like, okay, everybody's like, cool, there's another song.
Right.
But it's like, I'm putting out a song with Johnnyswim. You're like, wait, that's interesting. I want to hear about that. Or even if they know, like you said, Amanda, like, even if there's overlap, there's still like a heightened level of curiosity, which I think is a neat thing to see what happens if 2 acts that you like get in a room together. People want to, like, oh, I wonder what happened there. Let's check that out.
Well, right on. Well, I'm a fan of both original projects. I'm a fan of this one. I really appreciate you guys coming on to the Working Songwriter. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Goodbye Road's latest album is entitled Volume 2, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.